Welcome to the Institute for Advanced Astonishment. Today's guest is philosopher Tim Freke. How you doing, Tim?
I'm good.
So good to see
Astonished.
you. Yes, astonished. This is a miracle. Finally,
It is.
we're
It
here.
is.
Before we talk to Tim, I'd like to just lay out for Tim and for everybody what the Institute is about for Advanced Astonishment. Advanced Astonishment is your true, like another word for your true nature, your true mystical self, or the mystical experience, that astonishing experience of being, pure being. And in a world of endless talk about our stories, and there's so many podcasts, so much talk, so many books, what we try to be about here is what's really potent, what works, what really works, instead of just reading all these books or listening to people talk. What really works to help you uncover this miracle of what you really are. So in astonishment, Tim, we imagine like the M. There's a little logo with M to the third, like three M's. So the first, it helps me remind myself. The three M's would be matter, or the dream of matter from the one mind, or matter versus or materialism versus idealism, or that and how important is that. Also the medicine, astonishment medicine, like MDMA or LSD or magic mushrooms, these amazing ego dissolvers that let you have this advanced astonishment experience. And then the last M, I was calling it meditation, but to make it a little better, mind training, how to train the mind and see through this. It's like I like to see it like if you were born and then you had to put glasses on it like 2 years old, 3 years old, and they were totally filthy with whipped cream on, old whipped cream and dirt, and you went through life seeing it that way. And one day someone said, wait a minute, and they taught you how to clean the glasses, and you never seen the world that way. You get this shift, and the shift is sort of from a conceptual mind, that monkey mind that we're so used to a non-conceptual space. So those three M's, what really works, what the most potent symbols, practices. And I know, Tim, you've been at this for a while, so I think you'll have something to offer here. And if you can, during the podcast, imagine it's the urgency of was trying to save a baby from a burning building. There's so many people out there suffering, and I saw this lady talking on a podcast the other day, meditating and working at this for 40 years, and she just can't get there. And she's really trying. And I know there's so many people trying. How do we save that baby? How do we, instead of talking about what is fire, or measuring the door, like how do we get the baby out? So Tim, I was thinking, imagine 3 little jars, and if I gave you, I don't have pennies here, we have casales in Guatemala, but if I gave you 9 pennies, so you have 8 pennies and one penny for your thoughts after, and you have your 8 pennies and you drop them in the jar, how many would you put in each jar? Like in the medicine jar, would you put a few? How much, like would you put it all into the mind training? Would you put it into the matter versus no matter, which is a very, like, how much does that matter in understanding waking up to be able to see through this dream?
Oh, an interesting question. I think I think it's a very individual thing, because we are so individual. So, when I find myself, people asking me what I would, I can always talk about my life, which has involved all of that and more. But in terms of like what it's going to do it for another person, it's very individual. I mean, I've gone down the road when I was younger of, you know, the silver bullet that only this master has, or
the kill
that's only in
shot.
this book.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think that's right at all. But
How about
what's
something
happened
general? Something general that might
well,
general.
a very good starting point is what you've said. You know, I wrote a book a long time ago now called The Mystery Experience,
Yes.
which was when what was happening to me then is it felt like I want to try and capture the perennial philosophy that's around mysticism in a way which is right for the 21st century. And how would I describe, what name can I give to the experience? And I thought, well, it's one of stepping into this incredible mystery of our existence. So, and I was running events called The Mystery Experience where people would get it. And, you know, part of what I do is to give people this experience. And
yes,
if you told me when I first started that people would come and spend a weekend and by the end they would definitely experience it, I would say that's impossible. But actually they do.
oh,
Near everyone.
great.
I'm tempted to say everyone, but that sounds outrageous. And what I'm doing with people is two things. There's an underlying understanding, which can really help. And there's plenty we can explore about that. And then there's a way of approaching, you call it mind training. Oh, it sounds a bit scary when you put it like that, although it's true.
Right.
The ability to, a lot of things have changed for me. I mean, this last period, my late 50s and 60s, have been the most revolutionary period in my life by far. And I would say some very foundational ideas, some of the ones you mentioned, actually,
Right.
I don't agree with anymore.
I know.
And the whole thing is turned inside out for me.
I've been watching your
it's really and that's really helped immensely. And so one of the things is an understanding of consciousness, not as some abstract, pure presence-y thing, which I believed before. I can see it like that, and it kind of works, but now it feels like, no, that's not it. That what's happening with consciousness is that we are processing, our whole system is processing something in high definition, as it were. So most of what I'm taking in is low definition, it's unconscious, and then wherever I put my attention, that comes into high definition. And so when I'm exploring meditation with people now, it's like, okay, where you put your attention will become vivid. So if you put your attention on your breath, which is a basic meditation, I've been doing it since I was very, very young. Right. It's not about not thinking. It's about, wow, how amazing does breath feel? It's just like the most pleasurable thing you can, because as you sink into it, it becomes vivid and vivid. Now, if you go off somewhere else, it will become less vivid. Right. But if you can stick with it, it will become very, very vivid. And you see, oh, wherever I put it, you know, the feeling of the air on my hand now will become vivid. My thoughts, which I think are amazing, my ability to imagine talking to myself, wow, that can become vivid. Anything I focus on. So then you can go, okay, so if you understand, look, the universe is a unity, it's a universe. It's a oneness which is meeting itself in all these different forms, like you and me. Right. So then you can relatively easily, I think, learn to put that conscious attention onto the oneness of everything. So there's all the beautiful diversity, which is great. I mean, I'm meeting you, you're unique. How wonderful is that? You're in a particular country. It's like all that's the color of existence. But there's also a oneness of being. Everything it's one being in all these forms. And you put your attention there, and your whole experience of what you are shifts. And the thing which I do the most, if we're going for the pennies in the pot, it's like, where would you put? This is the pot I would put all the pennies in. From my experience, I really would, which is connection. For me, because one of the things which is a bit of philosophy and then a bit of practice, a bit of philosophy would, what am I? Well, it seems to me I am this particular psychobiological being in relationship with the universe. I'm not this. I'm this in relationship with everything else. There's never a moment where there's just Tim. Ever.
Right.
It's always Tim. So I'm a relationship. I'm the one as Tim in relationship to the one as everything else. And if I don't see that, I'm just Tim, it's much more limited. But if I see, oh, hang on, you and I are individual and we're also not.
Yes.
And so one of the big things that happened for me about 20 something years ago was that I stopped focusing on individual meditation so much. I still do that. And instead I got people connecting, as so that you would look at someone like I'm looking at you now. Well, I'm looking at pixels on a screen. That's what I'm looking at. But what that represents is your face and your uniqueness and your life and your experience. And then, but what I'm connecting with, even through this screen, is what's looking back at me.
Yes.
I'm looking at the psyche or the soul of James, the thing which is James is and I can't see it, but I damn well know it's there. So something you can't see is connecting with something I can't see.
Yes.
And if you let people really commune with each other, there comes a point, first of all, where the two souls really do that, which is beautiful.
Yes.
And then also it's easy to slip into this. Oh, there's one of us. There's one of us meeting as two.
Right.
And that's where this most enormous love erupts. Absolutely huge love comes from that recognition. So all of my pennies will go in the pot marked connection.
And what's funny is,
so paying attention and making it connection.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking of my path, which was mainly the apophatic path of silent darkness and wall gazing, total quiet darkness. But I needed that to get to the connection later on. I just needed that sitting in total silence. And I know you
did a load of that too.
Eye gazing. Eye gazing is a big, maybe that's one of the tools we can talk about today, because I know, is it very effective for you?
It's I mean, I love it, but I mean, most of my meditation is on my own, and has been through my life. But in terms of shifting people from this to this,
yes,
I've never seen anything like it. The minute I started doing it, and what I love about it is that nearly everyone gets it. So to begin with, there's a period of, so what I'll do with folks at one of my retreats is, first of all, we prepare. So the biggest thing is I want people to relax.
That's great. Yes.
Because, I'm sure it's changed now, but when I was young and I went to spiritual retreats, I would become a different Timmy, like, hello, I'm on a spiritual retreat, and speak a bit lower. And I'd be very still and quiet, and I'm not like that at all. I'm really like this, So my big thing is for people, just be who you are. If you are still and quiet with a low voice, hallelujah, good for you.
Right.
But if you're not, if you're quiet, be quiet. If you're not, whatever you are, just be you. Relax, and then let's come into communion with each other and with all of life. And what it'll build up to is I guess you call it a ceremony, but it's create a really magical space. So enchantment's a wonderful thing. So it's beautiful. And then sit people in front of somebody, play some music, really beautiful music.
Yeah.
And say, okay, see what happens if you connect for 3 minutes. And they'll be ready. So it's, it feels a bit weird if you haven't done it before.
No talking.
No need. And then it's, they'll feel it almost immediately. And then, they'll want a hug and, but no talking. And then they move around, and then there's another person. And then they do, and then there's another person. And then they do it again, and there's another person. And after you've done this for, with 20 people or 25 people for an hour, there comes a certain point, first of all, where you recognize how astonishingly beautiful everyone is in all of these different forms. And then you kind of realize, oh, if I'm looking at everyone going, wow, you're so beautiful, other people are looking at me going, you're so beautiful. And that's something which people find hard to see. And they get that. And then there's a moment usually for nearly everyone where you just let go. And so it's like, yeah, come on then.
Yeah.
And by the end, it's like wading through the love, just so much love and connection. So I have really found that is the quickest and most direct way. And it makes sense to me, James, because I have an evolutionary picture of the universe. It feels like we're in a process of evolution, 14
Yes.
billion years of it. And the most emergent, or at least one of the most emergent things right at the leading edge of it, is the soul. So if you connect two psyches, which are the most emergent things that have arrived so far in this unfolding of reality, expect something interesting to happen.
It's physics. It's
And
just astonishment physics, right? It's going to happen.
And astonishment happens.
Yes.
That's what happens.
And do you find it sticks with them? As a big thing that would happen to me when I was younger is I'd get it, and then I'd say, boy, when I go to work today, I'm gonna light them up. This is gonna be, and I'd open the door of the car, and as my foot hit the pavement, I forgot the whole thing. I stepped right into separation again, and then I'd have to go back and work and come back, and it took a while. Does it
I think
stick?
that it again, I think it does. It varies. People
Right.
who have done it many times, it will stick more. I don't think there's any mystery with it. I mean, obviously there's no endless mystery, but what I mean by that is, if you want to do anything in life, if you want to play the piano, there's one thing you'll have to do. You'll have to sit down and play the piano.
That's right.
And if you do that enough, you'll develop your own style, and you could be a jazz pianist or a classical pianist. And it's kind of like that with awakening. You can be a classical awakener, or you can be a jazz awakener, but
Right.
you will have to pay it attention, because you need to build up what I call the passivity, the past habits, which allows you to get it. So it's phenomenally easier for me now than when I was 20, as I'm sure it is for you. So I don't think it's like, yeah, of course, if you don't keep paying this attention, then there's every likelihood you'll forget. But that experience will always be in you, and it's easier to reinvigorate it. So it's never wasted. It's like a seed is there.
Yeah.
And for many people, that seed, once you've seen it that strongly,
Right.
it's very hard to lose it altogether, even if you forget for a while.
Sadhguru said once a beautiful thing about if you went into someone's backyard and they said, jump on my trampoline, and you and I are jumping on the trampoline, and I say, jump really high, and you jump really high. And when you look over into the neighbor's yard, you see something so exactly what you're something so astonishing, so beyond words. And you can't, and then you come down and you leave, we leave and go get some lemonade. How soon will you go back to that yard? You're not going to forget about it. So that's what you're saying. Once it lights that spark. Yeah.
Exactly right. And what I love about the things which I explore with people now in a practical sense is that it's about focusing on things you're doing all the time. So I don't just do gazing, I'll do listening for each other. So, I'll get people to close their eyes and just say to each other the words I am. So they have knowledge of their being, and just pass it to each other, and then listen to the other person. And again, connect soul to soul. And also maybe connect in the deeper way that there's one being going, I am over here, and you're going, I am over here. And the same thing. So you're doing it through listening, you can do it through touch. These are things which we're doing every day. I'm doing it with you now. And so what it's saying is, and it's not to do with the gazing, that always worries me that people, they think, oh, why don't we gaze with other people, like in the tube? And my feeling is, no, don't do that. Because if you go out with hello, then unless you live in somewhere like I live in Glastonbury, where no one would turn an eyelid, and probably Guatemala, that's uncomfortable for people. Because what I want people to get is, whether you're listening or you're looking, it's the attention. It's how you're paying attention. So I can be talking to you and we're just talking. Or I can be talking to you, and at the same time, I can be aware that by me making these funny noises, I am passing ideas, those mysterious things, to you from psyche to psyche. That's incredible. Just through vibrating the air and making symbolic noises, something which, what is it? That where is it? Is connecting with another. Where is it? Now the body's in the other side of the world,
Right.
but our psyches are right connected.
Yeah.
Because they're not in space. So you start getting that, and then you're starting to live with a different perception.
Right. You start to identify with that psyche and not the body and not the bank account and not the car and not all the outer. Once you identify with that, you realize you're not because the body is going to die. You're not this fleshy dying thing, but you're infinite. I think you are on board with, I think we agree with almost everything. If I take a chance at trying to understand what you've been saying lately, I think the only difference we have is if I called it pure being or no, you would call it being. There's being. I'll try. I'm going to try to answer your what is life question for 1 second.
Fantastic. Cool.
There's being, pure being. I can't describe it. Ineffable, perfection, being, and somehow it forgets what it is. I know you're going to say you'll have a different view. Okay, somehow
I don't think any of that.
Somehow
there's no forgetting or
Right. Wait, let me just get through it and then you correct it. So somehow it forgets and gets lost in its own it's like this pure imagination getting lost in its own imaginings and gets caught in the body and in stuff, and then it's it's like a slowly evolving dream where that awakens to, and it remembers what it. I know you're saying it doesn't remember. It's actually being born into. It's God being born into the world or born into existence. And so I think the only difference with us is I say it already knows at the start, and you say no, it's like a sperm and an egg, like it's born and now it's growing up into God's emerging through.
Yeah. So what you've described, James, I've written 35 books.
I know.
If you read 34 of them, you'd find that
at least 4 of them.
so if you'll know that that's what you're describing, which is, I think, a very powerful mythos, which is commonly found and which has really taken off. And with what could be called commercial suicide, just at the point where it's taking off, it seems to me that everything that I'd said, not everything, it seems to me that narrative which I'd put in those books is we can do better.
Right.
So, I'm only a writer because it gives me the luxury to actually do what I love, which is explore the nature of reality. So I've had to just come out and go, look, I don't think that's right, even though it is in all my books, which is a shame. But the elegance of the idea I'm following now and the way that it's unfolded since I started following it about 12 years ago or so. And the simplest idea is going, look, we've learned now that the universe is not a thing, it's a process. And we've learned that process is one of the emergence of novelty, of new things based on the past. What if, and we know that this is a one,
right?
It's a unity in diversity, as diversity, let's say. So what about if everything that has any quality to it whatsoever is part of one process of emergence? So the simplest quality is the quality of being, which we can imagine as a field, like in physics, within which the information is evolving onto all of these new levels. And so the simplest information, this is not dissimilar to the Tao Te Ching or Kabbalah, is duality, which is relationship, two-ness. It's one as two, uniduality. So that the field of being is in relationship to itself as evolving information. So there's nothing to remember or forget. There's nothing. There's two. two-ness. That's all. But
Yeah.
from that two-ness is going to come everything. And what the last 14 billion years have been about the emergence of greater and greater potentialities.
Yes.
So we've gone through matter, we've gone through life, and then we're at psyche. And that is this. So what's arisen relatively recently is a non-material level of imaginal information. And that's what spirituality has been exploring. Not because it's always there, not because we've fallen from it, but because it's actually emerging. And what you end up with is a very optimistic view. And that fits my spiritual experience, which is always makes me feel very optimistic.
Yes.
Which is not that we've fallen from somewhere or forgotten who we really are, or we've had our glasses all covered over with a muck, but actually the opposite, that we're growing into being able to see things we never saw before.
Right.
That spirituality is the leading edge of that 14 billion year process of emergence. And then the final thing which you mentioned is that then it's made me think, well, I experience, it seems to me, one of the ways of understanding what I experience is there's something greater than me, which is traditionally called God, although it's a very, very difficult word. And the problem for me has always been, if you put God at the beginning, he's a kind of stupid monster, which is what the Gnostics found, because the world is full of suffering. And if you can't get away from that. And you can justify it with, well, you need suffering to have pleasure and all of that crap. But the fact is, you do not need a little, I don't know, a parasite that eats a baby's brain from the inside. You just do not need that. So it's just like, no, that's obscene. Any God who's created that is an obscene God. And yet the God I experience is just love.
Yes.
And it's just sublime. So how could they fit together? And then you look at the evolutionary process, 5 complete extinctions. It's like this God doesn't know what they're doing. So that God's dead, I think. He's finished.
Right.
But I think the experience we call God is incredibly real and very, very important. So what I'm suggesting is, what if God's not at the beginning? God is what's growing out of the universe. It is the most emergent edge, even more emergent than you and I. And that we get to form this greater thing, so that as we wake up to oneness, our individual psyches commune in such a way that something greater than us is forming. And that's why it's such an amazing experience when you touch it. And it is love. It's because it didn't create this, and it's not running the show.
Right.
It's like it's flowering from the universe. And then we can play a role in its evolution.
Well, just to debate a little bit, in the view I gave, God also doesn't create it. It's more of a if you do the Course in Miracles, it's a tiny mad idea, or it's a dream of separation, but God has nothing to do with all that suffering and all that horror. It would be God is.
So what would be the God? What would the God? Well, there's 2 problems. One is, I understand that there's many conceptions of God. I just went for the general one there.
Right.
But I don't have that in my books. You don't find that conception of God.
Yes.
One much more similar to yours, which is a consciousness that's dreaming. But you're still left with some really difficult philosophical problems. One is, you've explained this mystery by a bigger mystery. You've gone, the universe is a mystery. Where did it come from? It came from God. Well, what the hell's that? Where did that come from? So you've added a huge unexplained thing. Whereas if you go, no, this has come from the simplest thing, then you've assumed the minimum. And what you've assumed with what I'm exploring is simply that it is. Well, that seems self-evident, and that it's in relationship. Well, that seems self-evident. So you've assumed the minimum, not there's a conscious being that's dreaming. And most of my books use the dream image. That's the key image for me. But it's an analogy, obviously. But when I dream, or you dream, we dream with images from the sensory world. So what is God dreaming exactly? Does that even make sense? It's a consciousness. How is it conscious? What is conscious? And it's dreaming. It's like, these are lovely, it's poetry. It's beautiful. It puts you in a nice place. But it feels like we've learned a lot more now. Humanity, science has made us grow up in new ways. And now spirituality needs to match it. That's my end up feeling.
Can you talk a little bit about, because my greatest teacher, besides my teacher, would be my own experience, mystical experience, my own
Sure,
experience.
of course, me too.
So I know you had some experience maybe at 12, very young, right?
Yeah, that's where it
And
started.
can you describe what happened?
Yeah, sure. So for me, was I just grew up in a very small town in the southwest of England, and I was always very curious, James. I don't know why. I just was.
Your parents were pretty amazing, taking you to Shakespeare, and
They took me.
yeah.
They were very cultured. They had nothing of this though, nothing spiritual. My dad was a skeptic.
Okay.
My mother was kind of like took me to church, but then she stopped going, and I went on my own actually.
Right.
But it felt like everyone was in some sort of coma.
Yes.
All the adults, like they were pretending they knew what was going on, and clearly no one did. And I felt like I was living in this enormous question, and no one was acknowledging it. And then one day, you know, the world was full of love, and I was just sitting on a hill with my dog, looking at all these people, little people at the bottom, running around doing their working and not thinking about dying. And bang, it just happened, and I didn't know what had happened. But what I see is, and I'm really understanding this. This is quite recent that I've really got this. Is that we obviously we ideate the world, meaning we discriminate the world with our ideas. So what ideas we have play a big role in what we experience. So I didn't have any spiritual ideas, but had been to church. So I had the idea of God, and I'd heard that God is love. So when I experienced this, I went, oh, this is God. And God is love. Wow, this is amazing. I need to experience this again and again and again. How can I do that? And off I went on this crazy journey to find how I could experience it again and again and again, and did. And then what I've seen then is that the difficulty, it's like there's nothing more important, obviously, in how you understand life than your own experience. But we need to be sophisticated with it, because what you think you're experiencing will depend on what ideas you've picked up along the way. And so I can step into a thing now, because I've done this a lot, where I'm experiencing this moment like a dream, and I'm the presence of consciousness, and it's all happening within me. I can do it right now. I've done it for so many years. I've taught so many other people. It's just I don't think any of that's true. I think it's a way of experiencing this, which is interesting, but I think there's other ways of experiencing it which are better. So what I'm trying to get at is that it's very easy to go, well, you know, I would have said it, but I experience it. I experience that I'm consciousness. And then what tripped for me was like, yeah, do you? Or is that one way of ideating the situation which will fit what happens into a particular mold? And there's other ways you can do it.
What do you think if that experience, and you match it over and over again, and then you do a little search and you see that the greatest sages, and from Shankara, Meister Eckhart, you wrote all the books.
Why.
Sufis,
that's why I had that experience, though, James. I didn't, you know, I had to learn that. When I first heard that I was the presence of consciousness, I didn't know what it meant. You know, I had to read I Am That was the big one for me. By Nisargadatta over and over and over and over.
Did it bring you back to that 12-year-old experience? That 12-year-old?
The 12-year-old experience of that expansion of love happened to me over and over again through all sorts. Through psychedelics, through meditation, through having a guru who I then left, because it's like I realized, oh, I can be in all these places, and this experience, this what I call now just being deep awake, can happen.
I read that.
It doesn't mean, and it's thank you. I'm very pleased. I love it. Is that so? But what you see then is, oh, there's someone over here who's having, people are having these experiences in fundamentalist churches, and they're going, it's because of Jesus. You don't understand. I experienced Jesus, and I know that the Bible is true. I just know. And then there's someone over here like me going, I know my guru is God. I just experience it. I just know. And it's like, hang on a second, what's going on here? Or the understanding which is common through the sages and all that, but you have to learn it. And then and then you'll get it.
But what about, let's just say, the Good Friday experiment, or where they give it to prisoners who have no idea, or a housewife in the 60s. I watched her take,
You're talking about psychedelics now.
Yes, yes. I'm moving to
Yes. Oh, that's a different thing again.
But it gives you that state, that it dissolves that ego, that monkey mind, and you hit that state that you talked about from 12 years old on.
Sure. I just, it's like, I understand why you talk about the monkey mind, but the mind is a good friend of mine. And I just feel like, let's not be rude about it, because it's a miracle. Because it's a miracle.
As a philosopher, it's this cauldron of ideas, and it's wonderful. But
it's just talking to yourself.
Lady or guy down the street, that has to drink all day to get through the day. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, because because all the mind is all that we're experiencing in the psyche is imagination based on our sensory experience. And so thinking is imagining talking. I'm talking to you now, and I can just do it to myself. That's all it is. And like with talking, you can have a conversation like this, which I think is wonderful, beautiful, and connects us. Or you could shout at, we could shout at each other, or we could talk rubbish, or we could just worry endlessly about the same thing. So if you talk to anyone else or to yourself in a unproductive, negative, or self-destructive way, then it will be self-destructive. But the thing itself is beautiful.
And well, that goes back to, would you say, when you the masters would always say the mind makes a bad master, but it makes a good servant. And for you, it's this, like a philosophical servant that you could work on ideas. And
yes, although I don't think there's something else which is the master. I don't think the mind's the master either. I think I'm a unity, which includes the psyche, and there's not some separate thing that's the real me.
Right.
This is
your psyche isn't a tiger that's attacking you constantly. I mean, I'm sure you've had moments where in your life, but you know how to tame that tiger now.
Sure. Yeah. But I think one of the things one of the things which is important with that, I think, James, is not, it's like, if you put it down, it's much harder. If you make it an enemy and you think you're going to fight with yourself, that seems like a real mistake.
What if you lovingly, joyously dissolve it a little bit? Just let it dissolve.
I would personally, I think all of these metaphors are a mistake. This is in Deeper Wake. It's like, no, look, I understand what people are saying. I know that we suffer. I suffer. I know there's things in me which really cause me a hard time. But let's take a positive evolutionary picture and just go, well, I'm evolving. What do you expect?
Right.
If you're going to evolve, you're going to have things which need to evolve. And that's, and so that we don't, if you take some part of yourself and go, you have to dissolve, or you have to die, or you have to stop, or you're a bad thing. It's like, why? Why not say, we're one thing. We have all these faculties. They're all amazing. Let's evolve. And it comes from the thing which is the old philosophy. Now, for me, when you go, but look at all the masters, they all say this. That's like going, but look at all the early scientists. They said gravity was the...
No, I think it's different than that.
Why?
Because science is part of the dream, but this is an awakening from the dream, or awakening in the dream.
But what you're doing is you are seeing it from within the philosophy that I'm suggesting you question.
But if you're a housewife in 1960 and I watched her on YouTube take the LSD and take a sip.
Okay, so now, all right, so let's get into LSD.
She knew nothing, and bam, she would say to, I don't know if you've seen this video, she's just this nice lady. She's no philosopher. She doesn't know Shankara from Shakira. She has no idea. And all of a sudden she says, I feel so bad if you don't see what I'm seeing through into the oneness of everything. She's describing the state without reading a book.
Of course.
Okay.
But how she interprets that philosophically will come later.
Right,
And,
right.
you know, I've been with myself when I first took psychedelics. I've been with lots of people on more different psychedelics than, you know, probably like you, I suspect, you know, so
Yeah.
a whole range of things.
Can I ask you most effective one? Did you have one that if someone did take this in the proper set and setting and they really did the research and they were very safe about it and they had a sitter, do you have one that you would recommend?
I wouldn't recommend it, but I can tell you that the most powerful experience I had was relatively recently with Buffo.
With what?
Buffo.
Oh, okay. That's here too. I've seen that.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary. So, but you know, right back to the first experiences with mushrooms and LSD, and then all through all of them, and it's a very good way to start as well. I mean, it shifts. You know, you can shift it with your thoughts, with your intention, but you can also shift it with your biology,
Right.
and it just suddenly catapults you into another realm. So I'm not saying you can't experience those things. I'm just saying how you understand it. I'm experiencing the same things in a different way that I was experiencing when I had a previous set of ideas. The difference is the way it's a subtle difference, but it's a profound difference, whereby, you know, I don't see myself as this presence of consciousness outside of this. I see that there's a field of being arising as me and everything else, and I am that field arising as me in relationship to everything else, and I'm immersed in it. So it's the same sense of communion and but I'm not outside. It is everything, and
Right.
I am everything. And I think what the reason I brought up the science is because I think we can see with that. You know, look, when Newton understood that you know, that what he called a force of gravity, attraction, I think actually he called it, was was making the apple fall and was keeping the moon going around, and the planets, and it was all the same, that what was happening here and what was running there was being run by this abstract force. I mean, an unbelievable insight.
Yes.
And yet by the time we reached Einstein, you've got another level of the insight. Now, that doesn't diminish Newton. No Newton, no Einstein.
Right.
Like, you know, Newton himself said, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants.
Right.
You know, Einstein was standing on the shoulder of someone who was standing on the shoulders of giants. So it's like, it's cumulative because we evolve. So for me, spirituality is the same. So the big change for me came when I realized I'd written all these books on, to begin with, I'd written on all of the different spiritual traditions, going, look, they're all saying the same thing. Can you see? They're all about love and oneness, which they are in different ways. And then realizing, whenever it was 25 years ago, that actually what I should do is not write about what they did. I should do what they did. And why I was interested in Bodhidharma or Rumi or Sankara or whoever it was because they took what they'd been given and recreated it for their own time, which is why we even bothered to say their names. So they moved it on, they evolved it. So then my focus changed and it became like, well, how does it need to evolve now? And my first part of that process was, well, how do I say the perennial wisdom in a new way? And that's all the books I've written.
That's
the
beautiful.
last book.
That's beautiful.
And then at a certain point, I realized, oh, the actual perennial wisdom needs to evolve. It's like the shift between Newton and Einstein. That's what needs to happen. And spirituality needs to start a process where it's really moving in its ability to evolve, not going, just repeat what the ancients say, what the old ones say. Just don't lose what the old. It's like, don't ignore what the old ones say, but but also question it. See if we can take it further. Do what they did in a profound way, because they moved it on, and we should move it on. Not just for the sake of it, and not without due respect. But if there are better ways, then that's what we'll create. That's the process of evolution, right there. That's it. And that none of them knew about the process of evolution. They had no idea they were an evolving universe.
Right.
And that's a very different perception. So their idea that there's a perfect you already there and you've fallen, say, or you're outside of this, that's the real you, and you've fallen into confusion, or that's a phase in the evolution of the soul, to me. Really important. massive breakthroughs,
Right.
but also really was happening 2,500 years ago. That's when it really started happening in the Axle age, and then we've moved on, and we've got a whole new way of being as human beings. And spirituality, I think, for it to play the role I want it to play in the next stage of evolution, I feel it needs to radically reform itself. That's where I'm ending up.
Does quantum mechanics, since they didn't really have that back then, I mean, they had these notions of an atom or something, but does that play a role in anything that you're working on now?
I think there's an awful lot of nonsense around quantum mechanics and spirituality, if I'm honest,
Right.
for which I get frustrated. But I do think there's ideas in quantum physics which have been very influential on me. I don't think quantum physics and spirituality have anything to do with each other directly at all, because quantum physics is about the most fundamental levels of reality, and spirituality is about the most emergent levels of reality. They couldn't be further apart. But what quantum physics does point to is that the fundamental level of reality is information. That's a big insight.
Mm-hmm.
That information exists in fields, which unites it. That's a big insight. That the essence of the unfolding of becoming is probabilistic, not deterministic. It's not all fixed. It's creative. That's really important. So I think there's some really big insights, and that it's relational. That a quantum possibility only becomes a something, a particle, when it comes into relationship with another particle.
Right.
So that everything, right down to the lowest level, everything is the one in relationship with itself in different forms.
Yes.
And
like the spooky action at a distance that those 3 Nobel Prize winners proved, tickling an atom here or a particle will affect one on the other side.
Because they're not, because it's it isn't, it's a level of information which is below spatial differentiation in the way that we experience it in higher levels of emergence. So it just doesn't apply.
Right. Can you say that in 3rd grade terms? Everything's connected.
Everything is connected. It means, look, if you work your way down, it's like, here we are right up in the sky. We're experiencing the psyche, the imaginal world where we can go off and have psychedelic experiences and meditation and commune with God and all of that. And then you come down and you go, oh, but that's arisen from this, which is biological, which is pretty amazing, but quite different. And then you go, oh, but this is made of matter, which is little bits of chemicals. These are chemicals which were made in stars. Weird. And then you go into that and you go, oh, there's just empty space.
Yeah.
And it's empty space, and it's just information. And information isn't anywhere in particular. It's information in fields which could be somewhere over there. And it's probabilities, it's probability waves. So you're going down and down and down until, I suggest, you come down to duality. You come down to the one as two, which is the fundamental root of everything. So the one becomes two. This is the Tao Te Ching. And from the relationship between them, which is the 3, comes the 10,000 things.
Right.
So I'm taking that Taoist idea and going, okay, let's take that ontology and put it alongside what we've learned from physics, but instead of what science does, which is mistaken, because it's reductionist, really, because it wants to go the thing which is there at the beginning. Well, spiritual people do this as well. One of the reasons people don't like the idea that God is emerging is because they think, well, if what's there at the beginning, that's what really exists. I don't think that at all. I think what really exists is everything. It's just that this is a more emergent reality. It's all real. But with physics, you get this idea that really it's just particles, and you may think you're James, but really you're just the laws of nature working, all of that. Horrible,
I used to think that way. I
was horrible, isn't
total reductionist, but I loved it. But there was the death problem. The problem of death tormented me the whole time. Are you familiar with the work of Douglas Hofstadter?
Not very, no.
But he became a friend of mine, and growing up, he was one of my heroes. And one of my favorite lines he said, he called it his religion, and he called reductionism his religion. And he said, the drilling down, going deeper and deeper, and you just everything you just described, and you get to, at some point past the particles, you get to this myriad of just nothing, nothing. And but somehow he's still a materialist. He's clinging to something there. And he said, that is my religion. But to me, that's pure imagination, or I know you don't like pure consciousness. I don't know, you'd call it being, maybe pure being, or a feeling.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, because I only call it being. I don't. I'm not that shift from calling it consciousness, which is what I've done for decades. Is really to go, look, it doesn't have any qualities. It just is. It's the
my last book. I call it's the groundless ground of reality, but I wanted to call it originally the groundless ground of being. And I kept grappling with being and reality, being and reality.
These are both words you can use, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, the key thing is so the key difference is it something which is already conscious, already has desires, already wants to know itself? Or is all of that going to come much, is that what I understand as a mythological way of thinking, which human beings have used, most of spirituality is working within, is that people took concepts which are appropriate for a human level and then applied them to earlier levels where we now know they're not appropriate.
Right.
So desire is something which happens in biology. It doesn't happen in physics, for instance. So it doesn't want to know itself. That's going to come much, much, much later. But something is happening, and we can understand it in its own terms. The mistake which science makes, which points to the things which you were to is that it goes, wow, look at this amazing process of evolution, which gets as far as the biology, and then this kind of byproduct of the brain, which is what we're thinking, and that's it. Whereas what I'm saying is, no, that's not it. A whole domain of the psyche. There's an ecology of psyche, just as there's an ecology of bodies. There's a biological ecosystem. There's a soul ecosystem. Yes. And if you go and explore it, which is what people like you and me have done, it's huge.
Yes.
And amazing, and will just blow you away. And my suspicion is, so I would say, look, I think the soul has evolved to be immortal. It has learned how to do that, like it learned how to be a fish. Right. Like the universe learned how to be a fish. It learned how to be you. It learned how to be a psyche. Oh, it learned how to be a psyche that could function without a body.
Right.
And that whole ecosystem of which you explore with psychedelics or meditation or shamanic practices is not only real, it's the most emergent level of reality. And the great tragedy of science is that it's so good on the basic levels and completely ignores the most emergent.
Right.
And I would like to bring them all together into one story. And just go, look, there is a oneness of becoming in which everything exists.
So back to the baby in the building, you would say even though you say everyone's different, so you can't name one technique, eye gazing with the proper breath work, attention to the breath, definitely preparing before, like you said, maybe learning what's the preparation before the retreat, like in the beginning of the retreat? Do you do a little talk about this whole?
I'll do a little talk because I don't concentrate so much on the philosophy because I can do that online with people. Right. And because I don't want to get into discussions too much, although I will. And mainly I do that with individuals over tea and coffee. And what I really want to get, James, is, when I first started doing this, my aspiration was that people would leave having experienced the oneness.
Yes.
And the love. I'm so much more ambitious now. Now I want people to walk away and feel really empowered. Is that the right word? As themselves. That, to me, it's like this whole evolutionary process has led to James, and James is it. And I want, James and every other individual to go, wow, my individuality is really, really important. This is not something which is in the way. It's not an accident. It is the supreme arising of this whole evolutionary process. So important that it's not even going to die when the body dies. It's that important. And what you get to contribute to the whole process is your individuality, but that through coming into these deep awake states, your individuality can evolve on a new level. Hence, I'm sure you came across it. I've coined this word, the unividual.
I was just about to ask you to define it. Yep.
So an individual that's conscious of unity.
Right.
But the individual's the foundation, not an impediment, the foundation, which can then blossom into something greater. And a unividual then is someone also, because which is you could say is in communion with universal soul or God or whatever you call that next level on from us.
Right.
So that we are what you contribute to. Let me try this little analogy on you. These analogies, that's all they are, but I do love them.
Yeah.
Which captures something which really matters to me, which is somehow what started as single cells and then turned into big blobs of single cells became something as complex as a human body. Trillions and trillions and trillions of these cells. And what's the difference between, say, a blob of slime mold and my body or your body is that all the cells are doing different things. They're all individual. So that you've got, neurons and you've got nails and you've got all skin and you've got all the different things they're doing, which enables this. And by analogy, I think something similar is happening with the universal soul or God, which is that as we come into communion, this communion of souls, which is giving birth to something greater than ourselves, it's the individuality of the souls which allows it to be more than just a big blob of souls, that enables it to emerge as a higher intelligence, something which we experience as this sublime love. So that what's happening in near-death experiences and things like that is that what you're bringing to the light is who you are, is your life, your individuality. And the reason that we continue is to keep that individuality evolving, because the more our individuality evolves as unividuals, the more we can contribute to the emergence of something greater than ourselves.
And when you say the individuality, some people could take that as the neurotic person inside, that all the problems, all the negative, but I think you're saying the more you are a uni-individual, your individuality takes on the God part too, it all I can't word it right now, but it's all coming together. You're not saying just be a person, you're saying almost like the Trinity, like be the whole thing.
I'm saying let the individual keep evolving. And if you do that, then all of that will still be in you in your past. Right. But you will have moved from it, and all of those things will be your wisdom. You will be able to know things because of what you experience, because of the mind troubles that you had, or all that things you struggle with will like alchemy. It'll turn into gold, and will enable you to evolve into something greater. And we're all doing that. That's my biggest message. It's like I don't know anyone who's stopped. And I've met some pretty amazing people. This is why I don't believe in enlightenment or anything like that anymore. Any end goal. Enlightenment is an idea it only works if you think you've got to get away. If it's the death of the individual and you get away and you never come back, then there's an arriving. But if all of that's not true, if actually there's just a infinite process of evolution, there's always more.
Right.
So what I see with all of us is that we're all and everyone is evolved more here and not so much there, and that's what we bring to each other. We share the fact that we're different, and some of us see things that others don't see. And so that what I love about the retreats again is the sense that we're in this together, we're growing up together, and that by seeing each other and really acknowledging each other and ourselves, that we can take this to another level.
Sort of like that old saying, the Zen saying, when you get to the top of the mountain, keep climbing. Sort of.
Yeah. The one that always used to get me with that, and I think it's pertinent actually. I mean, these traditions are amazing. Don't get me wrong, James. I have huge respect
I
for them.
know. I
But
just read your book on Rumi. I didn't even know you wrote on Rumi. I knew the soul books
yeah,
with the exclamation point upside down, but
yeah,
I went back to the Christian mystic book that you wrote and Meister Eckhart in there, and then you wrote on the Kabbalah, I think,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
all of that. So yeah, I know you're
So,
not
so
burying them.
one of the things I love with the Zen tradition is the 10 bulls story.
I don't know if I know the 10 bulls.
So yeah, this is a very central motif. It's actually pictures, 10 pictures, and
Okay,
there's a kind of an allegorical story that goes with it. And originally there were 8. And the story, in short, is the bull is your animal self, your lower nature, and the person masters the bull until the person is riding the bull, and you've mastered yourself.
right,
So you've got to the point where you're not being dominated by your crazy whatever. And then it arrives at number 8 in the picture, and the bull and the person just disappear. It's just a Zen
oh,
circle, and that's enlightenment. And then someone's come along afterwards and added 2 more, and some years later. And in the next 2, there's the person who's arrived at the top of the mountain and disappeared, as it were,
right,
comes down the mountain, and it ends with this image of the guy with his staff and a flask of wine in the marketplace, just walking through the marketplace, like, here I
right,
am. And there is something about that archetypal journey that I do relate to, because I had the experience of, whoa, there is no Tim and all of that.
right.
But actually what I found was that it brought me back to this and made me understand it in a new way and go, no, it's the individual is it. It's, it's not, there's, and when I look at my kids, or it's like, yeah, of course it is. Of course it is.
I
This
used to
is
love
this is
watching
about
you with
developing individuals.
Lisa Carnes and her
Yeah, yeah,
denying,
yeah.
and you saying, but Lisa, if you're on a boat and you're soaring through the ocean, it's not about, it's just this non, look at the water, look at the sky. You'd say, Lisa, you love your dog, you love to pet. She was petting her dog during the interview, and there was so much love there. But then she'd say, when she heard you, you'd say, what did you hear? And she'd say, just noise, like just little sounds. She couldn't come back to you
It's
said it's a
yeah. I
journey
think
out, but
that's
then a journey back. You got to make the journey back.
it's there. There is an aspect of all of spirituality in its non-dual form, particularly, which is, I think, pathological. I mean, the truth is,
I think
the
she's
truth
come a
is,
long way since, though. I
well,
think
I
she's
haven't seen her for
doing
ages, but I can tell you that at the time, Lisa wasn't actually like that.
right.
She was like that when she was on a stage.
Yeah.
Actually, she was a
Oh, right.
charming young.
You got to see
She was a
her
yeah.
backstage, right?
She was a charming young woman. You just talk to her
Yes.
like, we're talking. And there's
Right.
an awful lot of people who are like that. They're like, one thing when and I think, oh, you're great, I love you. And then we get on a stage and it's like, wow, that's just mad now. Why, you've just changed into somebody else. So one of the things which I try very hard to do is just be at least consistent. So if people think I'm completely crazy, they can go, no, he really is just
No,
completely
he's
crazy.
like
He really is like that, yeah. Because that whole spiritual game is something which, I'm too old for it now. It's just not
one of my
interesting.
favorite stories. I'll try to tell quick. I'd like to see where it fits in your uni individual. Is the story of the little bird going up the mountain, and it's eating grapes, and it's young, and it's enjoying the grapes, and then it eats some sour grapes, and it suffers for the first time, and it starts to learn about suffering, and it moves around the mountain, and then it finds more grapes, and eats some orange grapes, and then more suffering comes. It finds some bad ones, and it's like us getting a new car or getting a new partner or something. We keep moving, and then sour grapes come, and we move again, and the suffering gets to a point where it actually starts to look up, and it sees this beautiful giant translucent bird at the top of the mountain, just totally still, even though the wind is roaring, the bird is so still and so lit up, and it feels something by seeing that bird, that it does something inside of it, and it says, I have to get to that bird and ask it some questions. And so it starts to go towards it, but then, boy, look at that grape, and it goes back into the relationship. The world is still there, and then it suffers, and it looks up, and it does that so many times until finally it makes a commitment, and it soars towards this beautiful luminous bird. And as it's getting closer, it feels a warmth and a radiance, and it's like, beam me up. You're in the tractor beam, and it goes all the way up. The grapes have nothing, no hold on it anymore, and it's totally unattached, and it gets to the top and lands to talk to the big bird, and it realizes it was always the big bird. It is the big bird. And where does that fit in? That's my journey.
Well, okay. So I would say, look, the way I would say it is like, well, look, there is happiness is a response to something you think is good.
Mhm.
And so once it's happened, and then you habituate. It doesn't keep working. Suffering is a response to something you think is bad. It's unavoidable. Life is really tough. In with all of that, in my life, I would say these deep awake experiences, these more emergent states, are they're just the most sublime thing to experience, compared to which everything else is, compared to which, getting a new car has never interested me, because
Right.
I had these experiences when I was so young. It was just like, oh God, it's a car, it'll get me around. Now, I understand some people are really into it, and good for them. I don't have
Right.
a problem with that. It's
I
just simply
love the
that.
term deep awake, by the way. Like, just like
Thank you.
astonishment, deep awake says it
Yeah.
beautifully.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I love the astonishment, for the same reason.
Yeah.
So it's like, so that's the thing. When you see that, and I see it with people a lot. It's like you see it, you taste it, and then you get distracted into something else. And it's like, that's not a problem, except you don't want to miss out on this.
Mm-hmm.
And the central thing for me is, honestly, James, I don't know how people, I was so lucky. I've been so lucky. It's like I experienced this young. I knew immediately it was what life was about, and I followed it as best I can. I've still suffered and gone through all sorts and been an idiot and still am. But I don't know how you get through if you don't have it,
Mm-hmm.
because life can be so, so for me, one of the things I want to offer to people is like, if you have this and it forms in you strongly enough, that despite everything, there's a bit you'll remember in Soul Story where I've got this incredibly philosophical book, really, that one, my most philosophical book. But there's a little bit in the middle where I go, look, actually, this is coming from this very naive kind of thing, and it's an attempt to justify it philosophically. And that naive thing, which arises for me in these states, is despite everything, despite all that suffering, life is good. There's something good happening to us.
Yes.
And that death is safe, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And that what really matters is love.
Yes.
Life is good, death is safe, and what really matters is love, which
Beautiful.
is, pretty, it could be seen as very childlike, but is the deepest thing I know. If you know that, it can get you through a lot of shit. If you don't know, and that's why the gnosis is a knowledge, it's a knowing.
Yes.
And when I did another very big academic book with Peter Gandy on Gnosticism about gnosis, and at the end of that, I said to him, look, I want to just say, in our experience, what is the gnosis? And I said, I think the closest I can get is everything is okay.
Yes, all is well.
Like a knowledge. Yeah, all is well. It's everything, and that's a deep thing to know, because if you know that, if you've got that so deep, it never leaves you.
Yes.
Even when it's temporarily really bad, which it will be, there is a genuine faith, and it's not faith in a book, and it's not faith in a teacher, and it's faith because you know that despite everything, it's okay. You just keep going with this evolutionary process, and it will lead you on. It will lead you somewhere.
Right.
So that's the way I would see it. And then I don't think you're at the top. I think that's the old idea. You're already the bird. It's like, no, you will get to the top for the first time. Now, the bird up there might be a bird that's made it already, which is going, hey, come up here, it's really good view. That might be happening. But you are actually making this journey. You're not some other thing which is already there. It's like the journey doesn't make any difference. You know, what's the point of the journey if you're already there? You're not. You're actually growing.
And you don't see it like you're making the journey, and not to downplay it, but that the journey that you're making is in your imagination. It's not so bad.
No, I think
it's
you're
in the
actually making the
imagination
journey.
of the big bird. You don't like that.
I think you're actually making the journey,
Right.
and you're actually evolving and actually growing, and that part of that process is genuine novelty, so that where you and I will evolve to, nobody knows.
No.
It's not like, well, you'll evolve back to what you originally were. It's like, no, you'll evolve, and we don't know where it's going to evolve. I mean, literally, this is a creative process. We
Have
are
you
at
played
this
around
moment.
with virtual reality at all lately? What's happened? It's pretty wild.
It
You
is.
put the set on, you've tried it. There's some
Yeah.
meditations, the Trip app. There's some really good tools that could show people.
Yeah. I think it's a great metaphor.
Yeah.
It's a really good metaphor. Yeah, for sure.
So
And
this
anything which can help us, you know, it's like let's, and that's why it's lovely you're doing this, and it's just so good that there's so much happening. It makes me optimistic.
Yes. It's so good talking to you, Tim, and thank you for all the ideas. And I think the gazing is something that we could put in the astonishment toolbox, especially the way you described it.
Yeah, there's a lovely film which, if you haven't seen it, you will enjoy, and if anyone listening to this would like to, it's called The Best Feeling There Is.
No, I don't know that.
Film. It's a short film filmed at one of my gazing ceremonies.
Oh, great.
And so you can actually see what happens. It's called The Best Feeling There Is.
Can I get a link to that? I could find a link. Maybe I'll put it in the description.
I will send you one. I'll do it as soon as we finish talking. And yeah, you can add it. I love it. We're very lucky. Someone who was a very good filmmaker just went, I want to film this. I'm like, okay, great, do it.
It's beautiful to actually see something effective happening, and because there's so much talk going on, but to actually see something potent and to hear the people talk afterwards and what they say that they experience this directly.
The things we don't have people talking on this one, but I have others where people are talking, and it's just so moving.
Yeah,
just so moving, because you just hear these voices, and you can't, you can hear the authentic voice.
And I love the way you say, I mean, if it was me, I would say, boy, if one person walked out of here with something, and you say just about everybody or everybody comes out.
I want everyone, and that's changed as well over the years. I want everyone, and I really do. I don't want anyone to be left behind. And
yes,
and because we move together. And here was the secret, James. I always knew that, I'm just Tim. I have no magic powers. I can't wake people up. But what I discovered was we could wake each other up.
Yeah.
And that I've always felt it. There was a guy who was a follower of a guru that I was involved in when I was very young. And, in the Indian tradition, you have that idea of darshan, that you're with the master, and it just changes you. And he just went, oh, this is darshan with everyone, isn't it?
Oh,
and it's like, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
So you reminded me of that great story of heaven and hell. I know, where hell is a banquet with all the greatest foods, and that, the story in the big table, and everyone's starving and they're sad and suffering. And heaven is the same thing. It's the same banquet, same table. And the reason they were suffering in hell is the forks were 6 feet long, so no one could get the food in their mouth. But what you're saying is heaven is we feed each other. We can reach across, use the fork to feed each other and wake each other up. That's beautiful.
That's it.
And I heard you're not going to maybe write another book, or there might be something coming.
I've been working on a project for about 10 years, ever since Soul Story. I work on it most days, and I thought it would be finished about 6 years ago, but it's still not finished. And I think I'll probably do it as an as a series of very organized audio presentations, and I'll probably just give it away on the internet, on YouTube, because I know that what I have to do, for better or worse, we'll see if it works and what people think, but is to try and articulate this new evolutionary vision, which we've been exploring a bit, and I've been grateful for your interest to help me learn how to say it. But as I'm ready, and hopefully soon, then I'll start putting that out and see what people think. I know that's what I got to do. That's before I die. I want to do that. So I'm going to try.
You will do it.
Thank you.
And looking forward to maybe a future talk. And thank you for coming on and sharing. And I'll put all those links in, and links to your books. Thank you, Tim.
Fantastic. Speak again.
Speak again.